Hey guys, welcome to the MC Anime Podcast. We cover anime, geek culture, Japanese aesthetics, and Asian studies. We are a multi-fandom podcast, and you can expect to hear topics in your favorite hobby or fandom activity potentially. You can find MC Anime on Google Podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Also, please check out mcanimepodcast.com, our website. Furthermore, stay tuned in for another episode.
Hey guys, welcome to another episode of MC Anime. MC here. We got fellow co-host Leah. How's it going?
It is going awesome. The day is done. I have powered through. It's been good. So
Oh yeah.
I am excited to talk about today's topic. I know you love history, and I enjoy religion, so we can really get into this one today.
Oh yeah. And for anyone that doesn't know what we're doing Asian studies, Japan, and Shintoism. So what that means, we're gonna do Shintoism is Japan's, I guess, first religion. I guess.
Yeah, essentially their first religion, their first documented religion.
Yeah, it's not a national religion, but it is like a very pivotal religion in Japanese culture. Yes, you got Buddhism, yes, you have Christianity, but Shintoism is what the shrines are, the different maidens, the like different deities that you go to.
Everything that you've seen kind of in anime.
The gateways, but
yeah.
a lot of these stuff, anime takes a lot of reference from, like the Japanese gardens in real life, could be some glimpse of what Shintoism is, the bridge scene. There's like different things that you have to know about Shintoism. So let's jump into it. What's your take on Shintoism?
I think it with being kind of like the OG religion within Japan, in the way that it's kind of set up, where you have multiple gods that you're gonna pray to. The whole name of Shinto is the way of Kami, which is the way of the divine, the way of gods. So I do love that. I think it is still very reflective of how I think most of the world thought when it came to their first religion, which is we need to be like these greater beings that created us, and that's why we're here. So seeing how the Japanese people still use it kind of within their social structure, in the way that it's represented still in anime as a very fixture in their communities, I think that's really cool. So there are some old religions that just kind of get lost, or there isn't much teachings known on them, but this one has lasted throughout the times.
And to contrary belief, Buddhism was introduced in the 6th century. However, Shinto or Shintoism is no found or no official scriptures in a strict sense, but it's like a guiding belief throughout the ages. So it's like a belief system to many deities that, just happen to be a deity of the local shrine, or maybe this deity of war. One show that, is really notorious for this, Noragami. They do really well with like the different deities and the different types of, gods, per se. Even though it's animated, but it still has a lot of very Shinto originated beliefs and the structure. They explains it in an anime scene really
and
well.
movie wise, you can also watch Spirited Away, which has a lot of figures and folks from Shintoism involved in it, and the way that the story is told and the lessons from it. That's another great one, and an anime classic if you haven't seen it.
There's more anime that focus on it more, and there's just some anime that reference it, but not actually like in deep lore. But Shintoism is traditionally religious practices, life attitudes that are recorded with practices. It's very important in social life, and the pattern of philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Think of it like how we have like in here in North America, we have certain holidays where like if there's New Year's, make a New Year's resolution. If it's like 11:11 at night, maybe you make a wish. It's not a holiday. It's just something you can do. But in Japan, they have specific reasons why they go to these shrines, and it's mainly for personal motivation, um, or influence. So you're going to pray for something that you're asking the God for, whether that be revenge on your enemy or more money so you can like prosper your business or more wisdom or love.
yeah.
This is where you would go and you would dedicate your time to it.
Oh, yeah. And it's deeply internet connected with the value system, way of thinking and acting.
Hmm.
So another branch off going to the shrine to wish you good fortune or advice in this particular area, or bring despair to the enemies that belong to you, or whatever it is. You go to the shrine as a way of repetition and routine. So there's like special days of the year that you will go to the individual shrines for individual purposes, and each one has a particular interest that's surrounding it, like the New Year's, the New Year's resolution, the
You repeating what I
follow
literally
signs of
just
your
said.
family. Huh?
You just said exactly what I said. Sorry, that was funny.
Oh.
Go ahead.
You also have like smaller shrines, like your your personal shrine of your family, your ancestors being important as well. So it really branches out which type of shrine that you're going to. Uh, some are very small, like in the house. Others can be an entire landscape, blocks and blocks full of it. So it just depends.
Hmm.
You know, we have three different Shinto beliefs that we can classify the religion in. We have the shrine Shinto, the secular Shinto, and the folk Shinto. And
Yeah,
shrine Shinto is what we just like covered as one particular area. It's been
from the start till now,
yeah,
it's the oldest one.
yeah. And
Um,
state
Next up, yeah, state Shinto, and that one would seem like it was a mix of like religion and state during the time because of the imperial family. So the same way we have separation of church and state over here,
hmm
um, it's like the opposite of that.
yeah,
So state Shinto is a combination of them.
yeah. And when you have secular Shinto, it's like a new movement of 13 major sects in Japan, 19th century, much after World War II. So secular, when it became secular during this time, it became its own thing. So it's like modern belief affecting Shintoism in a way. So it became in modern time. And then you also have
Yeah.
folk Shinto.
Yeah. So for this one, ingrained in folk belief, which makes sense with the name of it. But it doesn't have an organizational structure or a doctrinal formulation. It's just centered around a veneration of small roadside images and
Yeah.
then the agricultural rights for rural families. So this is kind of what I imagine when you have a specific god that your family would pray to, because that person would be giving blessings upon your family, and that's very common.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and
And,
they're all three of these are interrelated.
yeah.
So
When you have folk, you have it's basically folk Shinto is like the background for Shinto faith. The secular of the sect Shinto is usually what's guided for the follower, and then the follower as a practitioner usually partakes into the shrine Shinto as well. So it goes
yeah,
into that order. And a lot of the folk Shinto, a lot of anime dive into the folk Shinto very heavily. The Japanese mythology has a base to folk Shinto. So when you see a lot of anime with like Japanese mythology, sometimes you can get the folk Shinto revolved into it as well.
Yeah, I think the imagery that comes with folk Shinto help with that. You can
Yeah,
create a lot of characters or a lot of influence when you have a visual representation and a
yeah.
visual
You have
medium.
your demons, you have your kappas, and all kind of creatures that exist. It's kind of interesting how Shintoism has become a integrated piece of the culture. It's really something to appreciate for how integrated it is within the system of belief.
I mean, I think 'cause it is, but it's also I think survived because it has these different sects to it. So it's
Yeah.
not just one. It has flexibility. It has movements. It's had its own kind of miniature revolutions with having the 13 major sects of Shintoism. Like
Yeah.
it has ebb and flow to it, and I think that helps with the traditional sense also in Japan. It kind of moves along with the culture and along with the people,
Mhm.
but you're still trying to remain the godliness. So having the imagery, having the diversity, and then also having it just be the oldest thing your country's had, it's just going to keep running through forever.
Yeah. And early forms of Shinto to like 1900, the Patriarch and Neolithic ages, a lot of it was unknown during that time period. Then we also have like, and then also the religion of the ages have direct with Shinto on this time. The Yei, White culture, northern island of Kisho. I think we talked a little bit about that. It's
Hmm.
directly related to Japanese culture, hence the name Shinto. So it was basically original rites and shamanism kind of influencing Shintoism as well. Which I think with the folk Shinto comes into play, having these like the rites of passage for aura culture and shaman kind of shifted to the folk Shinto a little bit.
Yeah, and folk Shinto was also bigger within rural communities than I think it would be with the kind of like the formalized government.
Hmm.
It's a bit. I think that also just kind of has like a pride aspect as
Yeah.
well. You don't want people particularly praying just to the god. You will also want them to have loyalty to whatever group is in power.
Yeah. And also
Yeah.
another thing that probably helped Shintoism as a religion, it was never made a national religion. It was just the dominant religion. So there's a difference between a national religion and a dominant religion. Usually the dominant religion just thrives because there's so many followers. Or the national religion is more like thinking about it like it's the national religion. You have to do this religion. You have no freedom to do any other religion.
Oh, I mean, you can. I would say that the major difference though is that with the national religion, most of those are founded by kind of political influences. Usually it's because they're established by the government as a national religion. And sometimes it's not even necessarily the biggest religion in the country at that moment. It just may be whatever that ruler,
Mhm.
prescribes to that already has a founding. And then it just gets influenced and introduced more and more and more.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, like a crusade. So,
Mhm. True.
yeah.
And then we have like early clan religion and ceremonies. Various places like the 4th century nation with ancestor of the present imperial household as they had in the the unit of society at the time, the Yui clan or family.
Yeah. Um, and so essentially, whatever clan or family, they probably already had a Ujigami
Yeah.
that they worshipped, which would be kind of like a guardian deity that they
Yeah.
would pray to. So there would be a prayer for spring. There would be one for the harvest ceremony because those are the biggest time in which agriculturally
Yeah.
you're getting the benefits of your hard work.
Yeah.
There was also divination, water purification, lustration, and ceremonial purification. All
Yeah.
of these were kind of like classic Japanese um, actions that were taken.
Hmm.
I almost said performance, but ceremonies that kind of were
Yeah.
done in honor to these deities and to these gods
Yeah.
during the early times.
And
And
most
you
of
build
these
your temple.
were directly related to the kami, object of worship in Shinto and other indigenous religions of Japan. God, Lord, or deity, but like forces of nature, good and evil, superiority or divinity, objects of reference and respect. So kami was really big in Shinto and how it's like influencing, which I think is kind of interesting because it goes back to religious artifacts being the the final focus to what Shinto is.
Yeah. And I mean, also in the beginning, like the ancient Shinto, it was polytheistic. So
Yeah,
for that, what it meant is essentially that you didn't just have one god that you could pray to. While most homes did have one particular guardian that they had a shrine for in house, overall, people had multiple gods that they
yeah,
worshiped. So the god of the sea, one for the wind, one for the sky. We've all heard of these in old folklore tales where it's kind of like a god that controls each aspect of existence.
yeah.
Um, and so with this, you had the growth of like creation and judgment, and they also had like a tutelary kami that was
Mm,
kind of like at the core of all of it, which I'm kind of guessing is kind of like a
yeah,
hierarchy system, like a caste system. You have your most powerful kami that's at the top,
mm,
and then you have the ones that cascade down that do have different
yeah,
meanings and uses and
yeah.
purpose, but you probably pray more to
Mm.
one than the other.
And these two
So,
different views of the world were like in ancient Shinto as well.
mhm.
You have like the plane of high heaven, middle land, and the Hades, the world after death. So it kind of gets kind of interesting when you have like the three-dimensional view of Shinto. You know, the plane of high, I think that's like where the gods reign, you can be maybe rewarded there. The middle land, the present world where it's earth, and then the Hades, which is the world after death. So like, you know, I don't know, it's like the three different levels kind of thing. But like most religions have this like sometimes
I
I
was
have
gonna
a
say,
single
all you,
setup.
you basically just describe like all three settings in the like cartoon Hercules. You have where the gods are, and then you have literal Hades, like literally the underworld. Um, and I think it's a really common thing because people have like that's how you base it also.
Mm,
If you have these big mountful creatures who like are beyond human belief and
yeah,
understanding and they're mystical and that's why they have all the answers, especially in ancient times when there was still much of the world
mm,
unknown about. Um
yeah,
Having these and then having a world where you go to, maybe where you re-meet with family, where you just exist or you're reborn, like all of these
mm.
things are a consistent thing that you see almost in every religion.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And it also the also variation of this was also two-dimensional, which is this world and the professional country, like the Tokyo
Which
utopian.
is close, yeah, to their capital name for
Yeah,
Tokyo.
yeah. So Tokyo is like Tokyo. I don't know,
Tokyo,
but
yo.
that was a traditional view, but the three-dimensional really becomes the view of the world. We have mostly the North Siberian and Mongolian shamanistic culture coming out. So the influence from the some of the other countries like Siberia and Mongolia influencing Japan in this retrospect.
But the
This is also where we
two-dimensional
have
view,
Japanese myths, but also the two-dimensional world of view.
yeah, this like the two-dimensional one, I think is the one that is easier. It's not just easier, but most
Yeah.
people subscribe to now. It's the more dominant view that people have because I think it's just having the present world and then having a utopia world is probably preferable over having to think about the
Yeah.
gods having their own world, present Earth, and then having some afterlife like universe that nobody really knows about. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I can see that. Just straight up utopia.
And then we also have Chinese
Influence.
influence on Shinto as well. Confucianism. Japan. It reached Japan in the 5th century CE, and by the 7th century it spread among the people. Taoism and yin yang, harmony of the two basic forces of nature, kind of interconnected into the culture at that time. And it kind of combined the development of Shinto ethical teachings, which is kind of
Mm,
interesting. The
like just how you
discipline,
behave. Yeah.
yeah, discipline was morally good and morally right. But even in Shintoism, it kind of plays a part with how Shintoism should be ran, what is expected, what is not expected, kind of thing.
Yeah, I think the introduction of other religions and forms of thoughts also allows for a bit more structure because you have to remember it didn't have any official doctrines. It didn't have an official founder or leader or anything like that. It's not like Mormonism, or Scientology or something bizarre where it's like a person came up with it. More, um, actually, just more cultural influences kind of aligned it in a new way that wasn't there before, which I can definitely see if people were praying to different gods for different things and
Yeah.
introducing kind of a yin and yang and having actual ethical guidelines that you should abide by might be important when you're like praying to a supernatural
Mhm.
deity.
Oh yeah.
Um, so I find Confucianism being introduced a good thing.
Oh yeah. And then, to the introduction of the Confucianism, Taoism, Yin Yang, we also have the myths come into play. Various clans combining into the pan-Japanese mythology with the imperial household as the centre. The kami of the imperial household and the tutelary kami of powerful clans. So with this particular thing, we have the pan-Japanese culture with the mythology, with the imperial household at the center. Um, this particular period is when the myths of the various clans were reorganized into the pan-Japanese mythology. As a result of this kind of trend of the imperial household and the powerful clans, it basically structuralized the system to be very effective, because not only are the clans important, but the actual imperial household being the center of the religion still being impacted as well.
Yeah. So there were a lot of changes. There were the Takai era reforms that were happening around this time, and then there was also this kind of like big push of Shintoism being pushed by the imperial family and government. So 10th century, about 3,000 shrines were throughout Japan, and they were receiving offerings from the state themselves. And as the power of the central government started to decline, the system ceased to be effective. And after the 13th century, there's only a limited number of actual important shrines that were left to receive imperial offerings. So I'm guessing the kamis, who again were at the top and most important to the family, those ones still got offerings, but the smaller ones, very few of them received anything. And then later
The
on, the
Meiji
Meiji era,
Reservation in
yeah,
1968, the old system was revived. And the Meiji Restoration during this time, it went back from the shogun to the emperor. So the emperor was the traditional head of state. So it makes sense that the old system of these offerings to the state to be upheld and make new again. So it makes sense in that encounter. The encounter with Buddhism. Buddhism and
Yeah.
Japan have a really interesting internet history. It's like they didn't immediately push it away. They kind of just adopted how they do other things. Buddhism is the second most major religion in Japan, so just keep that in mind. And Buddhism was really big in China, so it makes sense. It was
Yeah.
first introduced in Japan at 55 CE, and in the 8th century emerged tendencies to intercept Shinto from a Buddhist perspective and viewpoint.
Yeah. So so basically they kind of merged them, or not merged, but they partnered
Yeah.
up. So
Yeah.
shrines for
Buddha
Shinto
limbs
religions
and the
were made
Shinto
in
limbs
Buddhist.
kind of gave together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So where the Buddhist teachings were, where their temples were, you would also find Shinto shrines. Which to me is like a great way to. This is how they kind of kept the religion going,
Yeah.
is by having essentially these kind of collaborations.
Hmm.
Um, so kami, they were made to be equal to
Yeah.
devas or gods within the Buddhist religion. And according to Buddhist teachings, the deva are said to be undergoing the same suffering within an endless cycle of death and rebirth that all creatures experience, which is cool because we did a death and rebirth episode not like a
Mhm.
while back.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And undergoing the same suffering basically is like the dukkha, which the dukkha is a form of suffering or sorrow, the true nature of our existence. So that's kind of what that's based off. Means of suppression forms the object of the first sermon. And then we have rebirth, which is the sasmahara, samsara, Indian philosophy, central conception of metaphysis, the soul finding itself, the sea of samsara, etc., etc.
Right.
All creatures of
Um,
existence. We have therefore offering to the kami and the Buddhist discipline. You know, temples with the shrine precincts kind of form that collaboration that we mentioned.
mhm. Because since these shrines were within the temples, what they would do is that they would read Buddhist scriptures to the commies to give them aid, to like help them fight as they're living and dying again and again, which is a big staple within Buddhism. And then when the 8th century came along, late into it,
Mm-hmm.
kami went from being thought of as kind of just gods or deities to now also being able to be reincarnated as avatars or as living people. These Buddhas who were enlightened individuals who had like achieved liberation from samsara. So they had broken the train of death and rebirth and were able to come into the world and give teachings and give enlightenment to others.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is where Bodhisattva, uh,
Buddhas to be.
yeah, these were given to kami. Buddhist statues were placed in the Indo sanctuaries of Shinto shrines. Buddhist priests were also in charge of the management of Shinto shrines. So the maintenance from the shrines itself were taken care of by the Buddhist priests. So, and the shrines of Shinto can be really easy to maintain. So there's not some of them can be really small. So with the Buddhist monastery and the shrine right next to it, kind of mean that they were taken care of since Buddhism had a bigger temple kind of thing. So
Yeah.
integrating the old system back, and then Buddhism being the front foothold, kind of makes it really interesting how Shintoism still is like the traditional, well, the one of the older religions of Japan, but kind of also sees how Buddhism took hold too. Kind of weird.
Yeah. And then going forward through the Kamakura period, there were theories of Shinto Buddhism agglomeration that were formulated. The most important of the centric schools to emerge was Ruba, or dual aspect Shinto, and Sano, king of the mountain, which is a common name that was given to one of the guardian deities
Yeah.
of Buddhism. So Sano Shinto. So these two kind of schools emerged once we got into, the 1100s, the
Yeah.
1300s. Yeah.
According to Raibo Shinto, also called Shingon Shinto, the two realms of the universe in Shingon Buddhists correspond to Kami Amaterasu, Omikami, and Taikuk Okikami, enshrined as the uh, Isaiah Daijinju, the grand shrine of Insu Kami. Okay. In the middle of the prefecture.
Yeah. So the theorists of the Sanso Shinto, they were also called the Tendai Shinto, interpreted the Tendai belief to be central, absolute truth of the universe. So the foundations of Buddhist nature, all of that was being the equivalent to, what was a concept in Shintoism of a sun goddess, Amatsuru, who was the source of
Amaterasu.
the universe.
Amaterasu.
What? What?
Amaterasu.
Amaterasu?
Mm-hmm.
The more you
Amaterasu
know.
is the source of the universe. It's kind of like you see Amaterasu, you see it, you kind of think of flames. Naruto has Amaterasu is like black flame, but with
Oh, that's why you
Amaterasu's
know how to
flame,
say it.
yeah. And the sun goddess in here, the giant fire. The sun is a giant fireball, so Amaterasu is remnants of the fire. The great deity, illuminating heaven. Period claims descent an important Shinto deity. The high celestial plane also.
I
It kind of,
see.
yeah, it's kind
That
of
makes sense for the
interesting.
source
I
of the
think.
universe.
Yeah, and also this also goes back to fire being a symbol for life as well. It kind of goes back to the sun gives us warmth. The sun warms the universe, and without the warming of the planet, we will not have the atmosphere that we have to simulate the weather, the rainfall, all this other stuff that's like we take for granted because of the sun. This different season change, etc., is pointed to the
All
action
life
of the
comes from the
sun.
sun.
Yeah.
Yes. Source of the universe. Um, so with these two sects, they brought it together like a certain esoteric Buddhist rituals to Shinto. So again, more things are being packed into the Shinto religion that weren't really there before. And Buddhistic Shinto was popular for several centuries and was influential until it was extinguished in the Meiji Restoration.
So yeah, so it was really good for Buddhistic Shinto to exist, but after the Meiji Restoration, we kind of have a reaction that wait a second, Buddhism and Shinto are separate ideals. So that's kind of where this is playing at. Uh, then we have the Shinto reaction against Buddhism. Shinto was first a theoretical school of anti-Buddhist Shinto. Uh, Ise or Watai attempted to exclude Buddhist exceptions and tried to formulate a pure Japanese version.
Yeah, because you have to remember there came a point in time within Japan where there was a lot of focus on being purely Japanese and having Japanese influence in culture. So while there were outside influences, there came finally a time where Japan started to push back on Chinese influence, not only with Buddhism, but also with politics and things of that nature, to establish something that was more just made and influenced by Japanese people for Japanese people, rather than it being influenced
Yeah.
kind of by foreigners.
Yeah, and then also Watori Shinto, the 13th century reaction against the Shinto views an occupation, Tantan or chaos or Kaizen, the non-being was the basic kami of the universe, or Watori, was regarded the basics of all beings, including the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Purification had been practiced since the time of ancient Shinto, given much deeper spiritual meanings like the Shojiki, uprightness to righteousness, and prayers in which it was united with Kami.
Yeah, so this is where I think you'll see more of like meditation and constant prayer being implemented rather than just gift giving.
Yeah.
Which again, just adding a bit more structure.
Mm-hmm.
So Yoshida Shinto, it was a school in Kyoto that emerged in the 15th century, and it inherited various aspects that came down from the Wataru Shinto school, and it showed some Taoist influence. The school doctrines were largely the work of Yoshida Kanetomo, um, who was born in like 1435, and essentially the fundamental kami, so the source of all things in the universe, was Taigen Shojin, or the Great Exalted One. And for some reason, throughout Shinto, you see that the whoever they're calling the being of the universe, the name does change depending on what the influence is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, well, you Shinto. I don't know. Shinto takes so many variations. So just note that this is how it existed. This is how it keeps being a main focus of the culture because there's different forms, different variations. And you can say that this is like different denominations of Shinto, but it's all Shinto. Yeah. Instead of like denominations like Baptist, Methodist, and any other branch, it's just been Shinto the entire time. It's just a different type of Shinto.
Mm-hmm.
And we also have the inter-purification of the mysterious state of mind, which we're all purified, in which one is worshipped the kami that live in one's own heart. Although the Watori and Yoshida schools were thus free of Buddhistic theories, the influence of Chinese thought was still present. So they couldn't really uh, rid out Buddhist theory, but still the Chinese influence still played a major role. It's not as heavy as it did with the Buddhist Shinto.
Yeah. Which then it brought it into the new era that was known as Neo-Confucian Shinto, because again, they couldn't completely get it out, and as things changed with culture and with teachings and history, that held the same for Shinto. So in 1603, the Tokugawa shogunate was founded in Edo, which is now Tokyo, and the contact between Shinto and Confucianism was resumed. It started right back up. So scholars who try to interpret Shinto from the standpoint of Neo-Confucianism, ethical music movement that happened in China, and the emphasis was the unity of Shinto and Confucian teachings that the school based off the teachings of philosophers like, what is that? Shao Xi. I know I said that wrong. And Wang Yangming, who were big players, I guess, in Neo-Confucianism, and it
Yeah.
became the essential study, the main study for warriors, which is so strange to think of, like the way of the universe, the way of the gods, being combined with Neo-Confucianism, and then being taught to the soldiers is a very interesting thought. Yeah.
The interpretation to traditional handed down from Motori Shinto, each established a new school. We have the Taiji, which is the ultimate concept of the Neo. Confucianism was regarded as identical with the first kami, Neo Shoko or Nihonji Chronicles of Japan. We have Yusuke Awa's theory, emphasis on political philosophy, spiritual virtues, wisdom, benevolence, and courage, symbolized by the Sanju no Shiki, three sacred treasures. That's actually something familiar. Ethics as loyalty, piety, consistent the way toward the state. Yamasaki Anzai further developed the tendency and advocated both mythical Pietism and ardent emperor worship, which gets into the transition of the Fuko Shinto.
So, what you'll notice with Shinto history is that there seems to be a big tug of war that is common in a lot of phases of Japanese history, where they start to have an influence of outside sources, especially China. And then you'll see new people come in from the next generation that try and pull it back to being primarily Japanese. And then it'll go back to a mix with Chinese culture and then back to Japanese. And that's the same for Fuko Shinto. It was a restoration or revival of Shinto that was a national school for the end of the 17th century. Basically, they felt that the norms of Shinto shouldn't be found within Buddhism or Confucianism. It should be found within the life attitudes, the way that people behave of their ancestors. That was kind of clarified by physio- um, physiological study of the Japanese classics. So again, just making it more focused on Japanese people and the way that they live their lives and structure their lives rather than being influenced by neighboring countries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then we also have like Motori no Noragaga. Is also another school, 1730 to 1801. Emphasis on the belief of Mushi, the mythical power of becoming or of creation, which had been popular in ancient Shinto, and then worldly really of life, internal process of the world, ever-changing mutations. Okay, that's interesting. Beliefs together with the inclination of respect for the imperial line and teaching, absolute faith, all problems beyond human capability, tone of the kami, exercise great influence on modern Shinto doctrines.
Yeah. So basically, with Fuko Shinto, this gave kind of like power back to the imperial family, the royal line, by having
Yeah.
people have a respect and honor for them. And then also basically uh, saying that whatever troubles we have in this life, we are handing them over to our God, to whatever God is in existence that we are putting all of our energy into, whichever one we're respecting. That's the one who's going to handle whatever we're going through. So because of that, Motori, who was the most important successor, I'm sorry, so the most important successor of Motori was Hirata Adasuntane from the 17th century. So there was an influence of the Roman Catholic Church teachings with some respects. These were derived from the Jesuits of China writings and advanced by the idea of the creator God and the retribution for like ethical and religious failings in another world. So not in ours, but in another one.
Yeah.
And they weren't really accepted into the main current of Shinto. They were a bit too far off to be respected within Shinto primarily. Um, but they developed physiological studies that started with Motori and were trained many capable disciplines to go forward and kind of keep spreading the word.
And also during this time, Jesuits were trying to convert native populations of Asia to Christianity. So the Roman Catholic were like missionaries sent to convert people. It actually ended up backfiring because they accepted the teachings, but as traditional Jesuit teachings are, either you convert wholly or you don't convert at all. They didn't like they were taking their ancestral gods to put with the Jesuits.
Mm-hmm.
And the spiritualists for the emperor restored the spirits, ancient Shinto, many supporters. And again, Meiji Restoration as part of this. This is where we get the Sect Shinto, 19th century, new religious movements in range of the social confusion and rest of the people. Different wily mountaintop worship, half Buddhist, half Shinto, purification and aesthetic practices, and then we also have the combined Confucian and Shinto teachings. It's just a mess. Now
Yeah,
they
it
don't
was
know
a
what to
lot
do.
going on.
They
It was
just don't know what to do now.
when there's multiple religious movements, I could see why. And so there were several that happened during this time, and they were mostly based on the individual religious experiences that were aimed at healing diseases or spiritual salvation. So these were more so kind of man-led evolutions to the religion. And these sectarian Shinto groups, numbering around 13 at the Meiji period, they were stimulated and influenced by the Restoration Shinto, and they can kind of be broken down in these different sects of Revival Shinto sect, Confucianism sect, Purification sect, Mountain Worship sects, and then Faith Healing. So
Yeah,
those
and
were
then
the
we get,
five main divisions.
and then the other 13 of like maybe subdivisions or like sub teachings that were maybe like stayed strolling to Japan or something like stuff like that.
Yeah.
Shinto has no founder. Japanese people and Japanese culture can wear themselves. Shinto is already there. No official scripture that can be compared to the Bible in Judaism and Christianity or the Quran, Islam. We have the Koreiki, records of ancient matters, and the Nihon Shoku, Chronicles of Japan, or the sacred books of Shinto. So these are like 1712 and 17 CE, oral traditions of ancient Shinto, the history, topography, ancient Japan, construct Shinto doctrines from themselves by the myths and religious practices they describe. So that's kind of how Shintoism came to be. There was all these different types of Shinto, depending on the period, and also the different Buddhism belief, the Chinese belief, the people leading it during this time. The Meiji Restoration basically made Shinto more back to the old roots, and how the 13 sect Shinto kind of gave it more focus, more organization than it already had before.
Yeah. Just it's just a lot. It's a huge religion that's dating back from I think when we started with the History Japan episode, they started back at like 13,000 BCE. So if you're thinking that by the time they became aware of themselves as humans, Shintoism had always been like instilled in it, and then seeing the variance because of the country growing and fluctuating, um, it's really interesting and into what it is now and how it's represented now, even in popular media, is also interesting because you wouldn't realize that it has such a kind of wild past, a very
Mhm.
very flowy and changey past.
I mean, there's a lot more to Shintoism, but covering the historical perspective of Shintoism and how it came to be is probably more important in
Yes,
this particular episode. Because this topic can go on and on. That's how deep Shinto is in Japan. How much that it has that historical perspective as the founding, or at least a main chunk of Japanese history.
Yeah, so it gets even more interesting, especially as time goes on and more things are kind of fleshed out for it. But
Yeah.
knowing the base roots of it and where it goes and that it still exists, amazing. And so, like, I love our little history corners that we go through, especially for Japanese culture and history. So this was actually a really good topic to go off of.
Oh
So,
yeah. It's like, I don't know, Shintoism, you can dedicate an entire class to it. That's just how much history there is.
oh yeah, there's definitely much more, and this was like a fast skim through of like trying to get through hundreds and hundreds of years. But if you were to sit down and like really study it, it's going to take you months, probably years, to truly have a genuine understanding. And even if you practice there's still more learning to be done because it's so old.
And we talk about Noragami in spiritual way, but we also have like Mushi-ishi being really Shinto oriented anime. Murasake is another one. Into the Forest of
Yeah,
Fireflies. Natumi's Book of Friends. It's just, there's so many anime that takes influence, especially Mushi-ishi. I love Mushi-ishi. Like, spirits around us, and you have someone that can see them. It just kind of fascinates you a little bit with the supernatural of folk Shinto. So that kind of what pays homage to that. So
yeah, and I would recommend for people read up more in regards to Shinto and more
Mhm.
facts on it, and then go check out animes that have a lot of representation for it because it will be a
Yeah.
lot of fun.
And don't forget, Noragami is a great way of the deity shrine Shinto. So we have Noragami with the shrine. We also have Mushi with the folk. And the secular part of Shinto, I don't know if there's like a really particular form of that because that's so new. So
Uh, I'm sure you could find something or a show that has it represented in some way. It might
yeah,
not be completely on the nose, but it'll probably draw from a lot of themes. I can definitely see that.
yeah.
Yeah,
So that pretty much wraps up of Asian studies, Japan, and Shintoism. Thank you for watching this particular episode as we try to discuss maybe Shintoism and touch on historical perspective and how it came to be.
absolutely. Thank you guys for listening, and we will see you on the next episode. We have a few things to plug. Mason, if you want to go through all of them.
Yeah. And don't forget, if you want to support the podcast, we're on social media. And you can find us on Facebook at Blog MC Anime. Uh Twitter's Mason Colon, that's Twitter name. Also, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, Spotify, Radio, and then don't forget to support us on Patreon. We have the MC Animator tiers already made, blog ideas, podcast, all the 9 yards, special guest appearance. It's on there to support us, so please stop by there. Thank you for supporting us, and please subscribe to the podcast where you can find podcasts near you. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. See you guys.
Bye.
This concludes another episode of MC Anime Podcast. MC Anime Podcast is available on podcast directories like Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. We also have our website at mcanimepodcast.com. If you want to directly support us, then follow Patreon blog MC Anime. Finally, if you want services for hire, then we're available on Fiverr for audio and video production, graphic design, idea consulting, and blog and article writing.